Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for our latest edition of our PARAC webinars. Today's webinar is focusing on cybersecurity insurance, and we have a great group of presenters waiting for you. Today's webinar, for any board members who are in attendance, you will automatically earn your 3 educational credits. You will see that in your Prosper account in approximately 1 week. We are going to record this webinar, so anyone who was not able to attend today will be able to catch it on our website in a couple of weeks, and you'll be able to get credit that way by submitting a training affidavit in Prosper. We will take questions as they come in, and we will try to handle as many questions as possible within the time allotted. Please submit your questions typed into the Q&A, and I will read them off as they come in, and again, as time allows. The presentations I will drop into the chat, and you'll be able to download that momentarily, but I will also post that to the website as well, and I want to thank the presenters for allowing us to share that with you. And with that, I will hand it over to Ken for an introduction of our speakers. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you, Natasha. I'm Ken Hill. I'm the Deputy Executive Director at PARAC. Thank you for attending this morning. And thank you for joining us in this cybersecurity webinar. We have several guest speakers today, all with relevant knowledge and experience with cybersecurity, the risks associated with, and how to minimize against those risks. These speakers are industry professionals. They provide insurance coverage to retirement boards and municipalities. The presentations that they're going to give are educational in nature, and we thank all the presenters for volunteering their time and services. With that, let me introduce the speakers. Matt Donovan will be speaking. He is the Executive Vice President at Amwins. Dave DeLugash, the Managing Principal of Collaborative Insurance Solutions. Jeffrey Lydon, the Principal Owner of Lydon and Murphy Insurance. Todd Ahanesian, sorry, Todd, the Senior Account Executive for Cabot Risk Strategies, and Tom DiPaolo, the Vice President of Operations for Cabot Risk Strategies. Now, before I kick it to these gentlemen, I'd just like to say how timely this presentation is. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. That's per the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which bills itself as America's Cyber Defense Agency. I did not know that such an agency existed, but I'm certainly glad it does. However, yesterday I went on their website, and there's a banner at the top that says, "Notice, due to the lapse in federal funding, this website will not be actively managed." So maybe it's bad timing that this is Cybersecurity Month. And before we get to the speakers, just a few PARAC housekeeping items. Thank you all who attended, and especially those who presented and organized PARAC's recent Emerging Issues Forum. We had tremendous speakers, an incredible venue, and thank you again to all who participated. Most of the slides from the presentations given that day are available upon request to PARAC, so please contact Natasha. Also, we have an upcoming commission meeting on October 8th, next week. The agenda includes the voting on the new fraud prevention posters. This is a biannual thing. The winning poster will be distributed to the boards and the municipalities later this month, so be on the lookout for that. PARAC has completed its annual report, and we recently issued that. It is available on our website. Most recently, we issued memorandum number 26 of 2025. This contains our quarterly 4 education schedule. Some highlights of that are that PARAC will be conducting a new administrative training to be held in Danvers, Mass. On November 5th. Another session of the administrative training will be held in Norwood in March of 2026. And lastly, Section 91A, Annual Statement of Earned Income for Disability Retirees. A reminder that for those who filed an IRS extension, the October 15 deadline is fast approaching, and PARAC just issued reminder letters to those affected. Without further ado, I would like to present Matt Donovan, Dave DeLugash, and Jeffrey Lydon, and I thank them for the presentation they're about to give.
Thanks, Ken. Thank you. So I'm going to jump in here. Matt Donovan here from Amwins. We're going to run through some slides. While we run through, I am unfortunately dependent on hotel Wi-Fi at the moment, so I might turn off my camera to make sure nothing's dragging on here as we go through. But thought I would kind of run through general cyber exposures, a couple of the buckets to think about when you think about what cyber is, what it could affect, kind of generally how the cyber insurance policy is structured and how it can help navigate some of those incidents. And then really wanted to spend some time kind of getting in the weeds on social engineering, funds transfer fraud, and invoice manipulation fraud. Given the kind of vertical that you guys are in, I think that's of top importance. So there's a lot of different shades across the industry pertaining to those coverages. So without further ado, thanks for advancing. You can advance one more here for the data risk section. So think about cyber in a couple different buckets. You really have data risk, and we'll move on to operational risk here in a second. I think data risk is relatively understood these days compared to yesteryear, but you kind of have these big buckets of types of data that can govern the type of response needed, the regulatory it's issues that might kind of ensue following an exposure to this type of information. But generally speaking, PII is kind of the catch-all term. That's going to be personally identifiable information, and then everything else can kind of fall underneath that. So within PII, you'll have PHI, protected health information, PCI, which can be payment card information, which introduces different exposures with the payment card industry and compliance needs for really a non-governmental body there. And then confidential corporate information, things that are not necessarily personally identifiable in nature, but they're sensitive, whether it has to do with your own information, a third-party company's information. But these things are increasingly being utilized in cyber extortion events. So I'll kind of touch on that a little bit. Then next, if you go into the operational risk side, you've got data loss and extortion. While you're down, it can cause pretty big hiccups. We're seeing both, the original cyber extortion threats were really threats to, they're really encryption. We're also now seeing tremendous amounts of data exfiltration prior to encryption, so that you've got a threat to publish sensitive information beyond just, hey, we restored from our backups, so we don't need to pay the threat actor. So some kind of new shades of the extortion kind of coming through there. And data loss and restoration. There are different shades of coverage there, whether it's going to, pay to recreate databases, or if you require, existing copies or digital copies to kind of restore from. So there's various shades of that coverage within the industry as well. We'll touch on social engineering and invoice manipulation fraud coverage. This has to do with, one, you kind of have funds transfer fraud we'll touch on, which is a threat actor posing as you and moving your funds from a financial institution. And then you really get into social engineering, where that's the voluntary parting of title. So no one held a gun to your head. You were just kind of deceived into sending funds to a fraudster, thinking that you were sending the funds somewhere else. And then invoice manipulation fraud, which is basically social engineering turned on its head, kind of inverse social engineering. And that's where your business email, generally your email system, is utilized to issue a fraudulent instruction or invoice to a vendor, a client, some third party to pay you, but it turns out they're paying the fraudster that was in your system and issuing fraudulent instructions to that unsuspecting third party. And then, while really kind of a lot of this is driven by cyber extortion these days, but we've got different shades of business interruption and then dependent business interruption pertaining to systems, hosted software, networks that you are reliant on in order to operate. So kind of the extended network concept there. Go to the next slide. And it's just a title, so you can advance. So these coverages are kind of broken up. The cyber insurance policy fits together like a puzzle. Not every incident will trigger every insuring agreement. However, generally speaking, an incident will trigger multiple insuring agreements. Out of the gate, when you have an actual or suspected incident, you generally trigger what's dubbed the breach cost module of the policy. And that's going to tap in forensics. It's going to cover breach notification costs if you have to offer identity or protection services for any plan participants, and then crisis management and public relations services. These are all what's considered a first-party expense. So nobody is suing you. These are just the costs for you to start addressing what happened, identifying the size and scope, and then notification obligations, credit monitoring obligations if you've lost social security numbers, things of that nature. So all first-party expenditures. We can move on to the next here. If you have a liability incident, or you, generally speaking, if you lose any sort of volume of info, the plaintiff's bar seems ready to go. We have to send, I went to a conference one time and they said we send out these nice notification letters, which are all required to send, but it helps them figure out, who to identify in a class or a class action. So privacy and network security is going to be coverage for true liability, whether it's from a class, whether it's from an individual who's lost information, a third-party corporation. Kind of baked in here, you get regulatory coverage as well. Important to note, whether it's in the breach costs, breach response, or the defense of an actual liability action, the carriers, if you purchase a dedicated cyber policy, they provide all the vendors and all of the law firms that you will work with. You have to stay on their panel. We can try to get things endorsed on ahead of time in certain cases, but most of the time when we do that, we find that the carrier panel rates are maybe half of what you start finding in the open market if you were to retain an attorney to handle some of the same services. So sometimes if we get special approval for an attorney you want to use, the carrier will say, all right, well, we'll pay up to this partner paralegal associate rate, and any delta beyond there, you're going to have to come out of pocket and fund yourself. So would highly recommend utilizing the carrier firms. The panel, whether it's the breach response, forensics negotiator, ransom negotiations, the defense of these claims, the vendors that the carriers utilize, they've got pretty good rates, but they have those because they deal with such volume with these insurance carriers. So very good to put it in their hands. And the carriers also want to handle it from the onset. So, we have a couple horror stories where someone taps in their brother-in-law's forensics firm, or they don't think something's going to turn into an issue, so they don't report it. Fast forward, then they get a late reporting denial because the carrier wants to make sure that they are addressing all of their legal regulatory obligations from the onset if you have an actual or suspected incident. So important to utilize these policies quickly. Going to the next piece. So cyber business interruption, that's going to cover a financial loss due to your business being brought down. It's kind of broken up. You can actually open up a few of these boxes here. I think we have a total of 6 on the screen. The cyber business interruption, I'll go on to kind of a different shade of this coverage, but the original shade of cyber business interruption was for your network and was for a malicious act. So someone's really bringing you down. This coverage is to pay for net losses during and extra expenses experienced during that time. Data restoration is going to cover the cost to recreate or repair damaged or destroyed data. It's not going to pay for the cost of research and development, anything like that. But we do see tremendous amounts of man hours required to restore databases at times following some of these events. Cyber extortion is going to cover the cost to make payments based on really network-based ransom demands. So that can be, we've encrypted your system, and in order to re-access it, we'll give you the decryption keys in response to you paying X amount, generally in Bitcoin. And we also now are seeing the threat to publish. So, an insured may realize that they're being ransomed upon the locking up of their system. But then if they go to restore, oftentimes in that communication, the threat actor will say, hey, you can restore if you'd like, but we're going to publish all this stuff that we've exfiltrated. So it's just kind of a new layer of trying to figure out the best way to respond on a lot of this stuff. And then these policies get bundled with multimedia liability. It's really kind of general media, claims made, not occurrence-based, and that's going to cover copyright, trademark, trade dress, things of that nature, generally on your website, marketing communications, advertising, things like that. Next slide. And you can expand these. Yeah. So then as the years have kind of moved on, a lot of these coverages needed to be expanded. So those first coverages were kind of the core of the original cyber policies. And these have been expanded in a number of different ways. So first and foremost, system failure came through, where people started saying, okay, well, what if it's not a malicious act and my network does go down? A good example of that would be what just happened recently with CrowdStrike. A lot of folks had on-prem CrowdStrike instances that an update went awry and it brought down their systems. It was not malicious in nature. It was just an update gone bad. That would generally be a system failure, coverage triggered. And it was important to note that regular business interruption, system failure, and the next two, the dependent versions of the coverages that we're going to talk through, they're generally subject to a waiting period rather than a dollar value retention. So they'll say, hey, the first 8 to 10 hours, sometimes 12, that you're down, that basically serves as your deductible. And then we'll start paying net income and extra expense losses from going forward after that waiting period has expired. So system failure brought in the non-malicious, update gone bad type of coverage. But then, continue to fast forward, and tremendous amounts of businesses, basically everyone at this point, is dependent on some sort of a cloud-based offering, whether that's hosted software, your actual system hosts themselves being placed in a cloud environment versus on-premises servers. So everyone kind of said, well, these business interruption coverages are great, but what about when it's not my network per se, it's my dependencies that suffer a ransom demand, some sort of other outage? How do we address those for my net income and extra expense losses? So then came dependent. Sometimes you'll see it referred to system failure and business interruption. So malicious for system failure, malicious for business interruption, but these are really covering your dependent networks that you're dependent on. For the vertical that we're discussing here, I don't think this is pertinent per se, but just food for thought. There are certain insurance carriers now that have even further expanded these dependent coverages beyond IT providers. So if you were a furniture manufacturer reliant on the sawmill to bring lumber into the door, but the sawmill had a ransomware event and it ground to a halt, you can't get physical good in the door to turn it around. We can actually cover that from a cyber perspective as well. And then folks kept saying, okay, this is great. We got all of our network stuff coverage, but what about our money? So how about theft of funds? A lot of these coverages are duplicative within the crime marketplace. I would say the cyber marketplace has evolved much more quickly. We've got crime policies that are still referencing teletypes, which is just a little outdated by a couple decades. And we've got cyber coverages that have really evolved to cover some of these newer scams. So social engineering is going to be, like I said at the top, it's going to be your voluntary parting of title. You were deceived into sending funds. Generally speaking, cyber policies come with a $250,000 supplement for this, and we'll talk through some of the shades of the coverage. Client account or invoice manipulation coverage, again, is that scam turned on its head. So that's where your likeness through your email system is used to deceive a third party into sending funds. And then you have to make sure that these insuring agreements are expanded to cover funds that don't belong to you. A lot of the insuring agreements in the marketplace cover your funds, money, securities, not those of others or funds held in escrow. So very important, especially for you guys, to make sure that all parties' funds that fall victim to these types of scams are covered when in possession of the insured or at the care, custody, control. We've also got some other stuff that you rarely see triggered, but utility fraud, that's when people hack in and utilize your cloud instance for cryptocurrency mining or your telephone system for long calls. And then we've got some kind of non-breach data laws that are all burgeoning. So for the misuse of data in California, there's various different acts that are kind of brewing right now. That's not just triggered by a breach, but rather, were you allowed to actually obtain this information in the first place? Should you be purging this information? So just something to keep an eye on as kind of legal barriers start to expand. Next slide. So cost to risk, we'll run through these ones quickly. These are just some incidents that we see. This was from earlier in the year, so you can kind of ignore the 2025 numbers, but I wanted to put this out here. This is data from Mullen Coughlin, who serves as the breach coach for the vast majority of the good cyber carriers. In 2024, if you look at that data, the average ransom paid was almost $1.9 million. Or I'm sorry, demand was $1.9 million. The average paid was $520,000. Better than almost half of the prior year in 2023, where the average paid was $937. So I only put this out there just to say we can get limits chewed through quite quickly if we have a stout ransom demand. So as you're choosing some of the policy limits, it's kind of good to think about a bucket that could vanish pretty quickly in some of these ransom incidents. Go to the next slide. Okay, and this is resulting from business email compromise. So it's still one of the most frequent types of incidents that we see. They generally result in fraudulent wire transactions. So you can see the amount fraudulently wired and the medians that are thrown there. I mean, we're getting into pretty decent six-figure numbers. A lot of the wire transfer fraud, it really emanates from the compromise of business email systems. That's why there's a really enhanced focus on getting multi-factor authentication on these systems. Next slide. I'll touch through these fraud coverages because there's a lot of these different variances throughout the business. So social engineering, voluntary parting, the middle one, invoice fraud, insured's computer systems utilized to deceive a vendor or client in paying an invoice. And then funds transfer fraud, true blue funds transfer fraud is really the threat actor posing as you and issuing a fraudulent transfer instruction to a financial institution. Go to the next slide. An employee theft would be covered on your true crime policy, not on this side. And then we can expand this as well. You have to make sure really how the insuring agreements are crafted or how the exclusions are kind of added at the end to make sure that you've got customer funds, physical property, not just funds, money, securities. And then oftentimes we see coverages now expanding into the control group, which is really the C-suite or employee funds if they are also stolen as a result of an attack on the business. Next slide. Here are a number of exclusions, and this is what I really wanted to call attention to in this presentation because these policies are so different. So the first one here is a common one from Chubb's base language. So pertaining to the social engineering, they say no coverage will be available for a loss in excess of $50,000 unless the transferring payment or delivery of money or securities, note that there's no property coverage there, is made by a control group member, which is really your C-suite, an employee, agent, independent contractor, other representative, authorization from a control. So basically, if you have an employee, they need to get dual sign off for any transfer made over $50,000 or Chubb will deny the claim. And this is buried, I kind of joke around and on page 72 in Braille is usually where these exclusions lie. So important to really comb through with a fine-tooth comb here. The next one here, computer fraud cost means the amount fraudulently obtained from the insured. Computer fraud costs include the direct financial loss only. Computer fraud costs do not include any portion of such amount that can reasonably expect to be reimbursed by a third party. I believe that one is from HSB. So one, direct financial loss, not covering any customer funds, any employee funds, anything like that, right? And then they leave kind of a caveat out there. If they think you should be able to get your money back, they may not want to cut the check. The next one here, fraudulent instruction means the transfer payment of money securities by an insured as a result of a fraudulent written electronic telegraphic cable teletype or telephone instructions provided by a third party that is intended to mislead an insured through the misrepresentation of a material fact, which is relied upon in good faith by the insured. So a lot of words there, but again, money or securities. And then you have to, in certain policies, look how those are defined to make sure it doesn't restrict it to just the insured's money or securities, but also no physical property if you're shipping any equipment, anything like that to other locations. Next one here. Fraudulent instruction will not include loss arising out of fraudulent instructions received by the insured, which are not first authenticated via a method other than the original means of the request to verify the authenticity or validity of the request. This is your callback provision. So if you did not call a known number for this particular insurance policy prior to sending that transfer, they'll deny the claim. So these are all things we're looking when we place policies to knock out via mandatory endorsements or specialized coverage enhancements to tweak these base form restrictions that we find pretty untenable. The next one here, this is a funky one that comes from Tokyo Marine HCC. So they deny any claim based upon arising from or any way involving the giving or surrendering of money, securities, or other property. They included other property, that's nice, in exchange for or purchase of goods or services that are not yet delivered, whether fraudulent or not. So if you've not performed, I guess maybe a cash on delivery 1990s type of situation where you're only paying at the time of delivery, but generally speaking, services or products have not been delivered yet when money is being exchanged. And we see TMHCC trying to dig in on this exclusion to say, hey, you hadn't delivered the services yet. They don't really seem to understand that someone's left holding the bag and that person's going to be looking to our insured. But this is one that, through AmWins, we have changed through an amendatory endorsement, but it's just lurking in their base wording for any off-the-rack policy from TMHCC. And then you can look too in the definition section. So computer crimes in this policy I was reviewing, sometimes they'll use invoice manipulation as a different defined term, means the intentional, fraudulent, or unauthorized input, destruction, or modification of electronic data into computer systems by an entity which is not an insured organization or person who is not an insured person. So again, these things can be defined in various exchange definitions throughout the policy. That you can't just do a search for invoice manipulation. Unfortunately, the verbiage used, it varies pretty greatly from policy to policy. Go next. And then again, invoice costs means the direct net costs incurred by the insured organization to provide the transfer of goods, products, or services to a third party. This one comes from At Bay. I think Crum and Forrester also still has this, where they basically say social engineering will cover on a gross basis. But the reverse social engineering or invoice fraud, we want to strip out any kind of profit margin, and we only want to reimburse net amounts that were lost. So something that we're absolutely working to remove from those policy wordings as well. Next slide. Okay, so important to note too that a lot of these coverages are duplicative in the crime, and it's something that you have to take into account. Both policies will have what are called mutually repugnant exclusions. So they'll both have some shade of this policy will be excess over and will not contribute with any other valid and collectible insurance, providing any other coverage afforded under this policy unless such other insurance is specifically written as excess over this policy. So for this reason, we really try to offer our insureds standalone excess social engineering, because then we can get one self-insured retention or deductible on the cyber policy to apply, and then it automatically flows straight through the excess social engineering limits. So if you have a cyber policy and a crime policy, you'll have both carriers pointing fingers at one another. They both are not allowed to deny the claim, but you really get into some tough, okay, what's the deductible on one side? What's the deductible on the other side? How much limit is on the crime versus on the cyber? We should proportionally prorate that subject to the retentions applying. It really just gets messy in adjusting the claim. So as best you can, you want to try to get the social engineering and any crime or other additional limits pertaining to the social engineering to kind of stack nicely without having these mutually repugnant exclusions apply. Next slide. And I just kind of point out here, you can hit the next one more time. Yeah, so in the blue part, just kind of be aware with your third-party providers that you're working with. Really, every cloud provider worth their salt has some sort of limitation of liabilities like this. So if you are reliant on hosted software, hosted cloud platforms, they basically all don't warrant that their services will be error-free and completely secure in some way, shape, or form. And then in a limitation of liability, they'll say liability, whether in contract toward strict liability or otherwise, will not exceed the total amount you actually paid for us through the cloud services. So generally speaking, if you have data parked in a cloud or in a third-party host environment, best case scenario, they might offer you service credits for future services if they suffer a breach or some kind of downtime. And those credits will be limited to the amount that you paid them for services. So that's where the insurance policy kicks in to make sure that you don't get dented too bad on a situation like this. But it's just important to note that it's basically impossible to outsource this stuff to cloud providers or third-party hosts. There's a big misnomer out there saying, hey, I'm in AWS or Google Cloud or whatever, I'm good. The contract terms are really not on the insured side. There's just a couple more things to touch on. I don't have to get into this slide here. It's available for everyone to look at. It's just kind of noting that there are a number of stakeholders that may or may not be tapped in based on the type of event that happens. And if you go to the next slide, it's kind of a flavor of the roadmap of how that goes down. So from the time of detection, you generally mobilize your incident response team. You'll get engagement of the breach coach. All of these policies, if you buy a standalone cyber policy, they come with a breach coach, man, 24/7. Mullen Coughlin had the data at the beginning of the presentation here that they're kind of the preeminent firm. Lewis Brisbois is another one that's out there a lot. You get a veil of attorney-client privilege if you have to air out some dirty laundry. You had a rogue employee event, you didn't update something that you should have, and they'll kind of be empowered by the carrier to run point between the claims group and you to get the appropriate vendors tapped in. You'll generally engage law enforcement, financial institutions. You might have a specialized forensics investigation firms or a PFI if it's credit card incidents. It's a specialized forensics firm. You got to develop your communication strategy. You got an engagement negotiation of a ransom payment firm, perhaps, if someone needs to make that payment for you, clear what's called OFAC, Office of Foreign Assets and Controls, to make sure that we're not making a payment to a sanctioned country, which would be funding terrorism. You might have restoration from backups or keys, PR firm, engagement of mailing call center to provide credit monitoring for plan participants, notify folks of a data breach, data mining, regulatory interaction, disclosures as required by law, contract, or just by courtesy for PR reasons, really. And then finally, litigation and claims if you finally get sued or people come after you. So the prior slide showed kind of all the stakeholders. The carrier really holds all of these folks on retainer for you. So I would say that the cyber policy is a lot more than just a checkbook. It's very much the roadmap to respond to these types of incidents with panel vendors and carriers at your beck and call, rather than trying to get out the phone book at the time of incident. So I think that's the end of my slides, I believe, here. I don't know if there were any questions that are popping up.
No, we've got a quiet group this morning.
Fair enough.
Okay, I will transition to the next presentation, if you can bear with me for 1 second. Jeff and David, I don't know if you wanted to add to the presentation.
No, I think Matt summed it up very well, but I would just say if anyone has any questions and wants to just discuss offline, don't be afraid to reach out to Jeff or I directly.
Yeah, same thing. Matt, I think, did a fantastic job. I think the key point Matt pointed out is not every policy is the same. You need to make sure you're getting the correct policy for the risk, and with the retirement system, so that I think they need to make sure that the policies that they have in place have the correct endorsements and cover and don't have some of the coverage restrictions that Matt talked about.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to transition now and share my screen with the second presentation. I'll turn it over to Tom and Tom.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. Good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here and present to you folks. That was a fantastic presentation by the first team with Matt. And there was a lot of very good information in there, which I hope there's quite a bit of takeaways for the whole audience today. I think what Todd and I will do, because we are all in the same space, and as we will go through our presentation today, there is some overlap and redundancy. So rather than go really deep and reiterate a lot of the great information that Matt had provided for you, we will take an approach and concentrate on some other areas which all circle around the exposure to cyber. So I guess to lead off the conversation, the one important takeaway I would recommend that everybody walks away understanding is that cyber is much more complex than what little 5-letter word is, right? And the way we approach cyber, it's like a 3-prong approach to making sure you are properly protected for a cyber event. So there are 3 things that you should be actively and knowingly involved with to provide that protection to you. First, obviously, Matt did a great job discussing the insurance, and that is number one protection when you are experiencing obviously any kind of a cyber breach, and that's going to be your safety net that helps make you whole and get you back before the position you were in before the claim happened. Physical protections are what we consider more tactical approach, are the things that I'm sure you're all aware of: firewalls, endpoint detection and response, MFA. You always hear these buzzwords and these buzz terms. As Todd and I talked to today, we find some of these are probably taken a little bit too lightly and maybe not engaged, but that is another layer of protection to keep your system and your company safe. And then lastly, which is probably one of the most underrated portion to protections against cyber, is training. And this first slide that we have really speaks to and we'll segue into the whole training piece. So it's really important to understand that you have the strongest firewalls, all the mechanisms in place to protect your system, but we are humans, and the human error is a huge contributor to any cyber exposure. So just some data over the last year that we thought we would bring to your attention, which were causes of breaches. Just in the last year, hacking, which includes skimming, phishing, malware, ransomware type of claims, they resulted 59.5% of all claims. Employee negligence was another 10%, accident exposure, and so forth and so on. It shows you the breakdown. But most of claims come through some form of a phishing, hacking exposure, which really relates back to, it's almost one together with the employee negligence. It has to do with some human error. So having said that, we should really talk about what the trainings that are available. Now, as we go out and obviously contribute to, we deal with a lot of the newest members. We're trying to get this out in front of them. There are a lot of resources that are available to folks now through the Mass Cyber grant, and certain programs that will provide those resources to you. Without any, I'm just going to give as an example. This is not a promotion or a plug for any particular company, but I know through the Mass Cyber grant, if you are participating in that, there's access to KnowBe4, which is one of the very great vendors that are out there, which provide regular training on a monthly basis to all your employees. And that to me is probably one of the most important things that you can do. I will really impress upon everybody that cyber training is not a one and done type of event. It's not, oh, we have our annual training, it's done once a year. There are many different vendors that provide different levels of training, but it's something that should be repeated. It's like learning a language. As we go through life every day, we're all multitasking, we're all short-staffed, we're handling many jobs and many things across our desk. We don't always take heed to the things, the signs or some of the things that we can catch, which would prevent these claims. These small trainings on a regular basis really drive home to all your average employees every day what they should be looking at, how to read an email, how to look at who the email sender is, what a link, the signs or the warnings that the tone of an email would be, issues that would obviously create a cyber event. So we can go on to the next slide, which would be types of breaches. Todd, do you want to kind of talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, so just the different types of breaches that affect folks, we went over some of them previously, but it would include the phishing, the ransomware, or the extortion attempts, the lost or stolen devices. That's another one. You lose your cell phone or your laptop, and then now you got to report that to the carrier, and it's going to be a response. And I think we've already hit on most.
We have. So that's a good point to bring up. It's interesting. People think of cyber and they just think of a hacking, exposure. Someone broke into your system and stole data. The actors today that are actually masterminding all these ways of coming and getting into your systems or whatever, it's taken a very broad now approach. It's not just an email. It can be done through social media, online shopping, even through snail mail. Now you can get letters in the mail which will prompt you to do something, which will lead eventually to an online cyber attack. The phishing scams that are going on, they're getting so complicated and so sophisticated, they're starting to name them. In the last year, one of the most common ones that we were seeing that were coming across our desk was this grandfather scheme where the bad actors were pretending to be a family member or a member that was trying to help someone, and this whole scenario unrolls and evolves into making an employee or a person respond to whatever the situations that they're creating. And again, it ends up in a ransom attack or some kind of breach of your
Can be
information.
even text messages sent.
Yeah.
You'll get a text message from the CEO or executive director saying, I need you to send me some gift cards, or it's this person's retirement party. We're gonna get together, but I won't have time. Can you please go pick up a gift card or send some money here? So they're always changing, they're always evolving. Just when you kind of figure out one scam, they're on to the next one. So it is really staying on your feet on that. And that's, to Tom's point about the cyber training, is very helpful. When you partner with a group like Know Before, and there's other groups out there too, it doesn't have to be Know Before. They're going to train your employees just to be mindful of those red flags, those little triggers that say, hey, wait a second, let me slow down for a minute. And a lot of the employee error, no one's doing it intentionally. It's that, everyone gets so many emails, they're so busy, they're overstressed. And so you get these emails that are high pressure, they look legitimate, you're going about your day, and you can have like Tom said, you can have the best, multi-factor authentication, you can have the endpoint detection and response, a great firewall, but all it takes is that one click, someone moving a little too quickly, not keyed into those red flags, and then making the error of opening up the company to a cyber, attack.
So Tom and Todd, I do have a couple of questions that came in.
Sure.
If retirement board staff members participate in cybersecurity training, our staff does the Know Before training, are there discounts offered on the yearly premium?
That would probably depend on who the insurance carrier is. I know in the product that we provide, because we take a loss control risk management approach to the insurance, so there are credits that are provided when there is proper cyber prevention in play, including, and I know Dave definitely touched upon this in his presentation, and it goes without saying, he did a great job really detailing what a response plan is. But the most important takeaway about what he explained is that you do have a response plan. As Todd and I were listening, we were listening to the presentation, saying, we bring this up to our members all the time, that you really do not. I will just start with this. I'm hoping that many of you out there listening have not experienced a cyber loss. Maybe some of you have, so this will really ring home. But the way they refer to cyber today, it's not a matter of if, it's just really a matter of when, because these cyber schemes are getting so sophisticated. With all the training in the world, best MFA, EDR solutions, and insurance, they still sometimes get through, and they are getting so sophisticated that you want to make sure you have all these things in play. We really make sure that you don't want to go this alone. You want to have the insurance in place for you, because all the things that happen during that response timeline are very trying. They're very complicated, not something you'd ever want to go alone. So having the response plan in place is very, very important, along with the training. And yes, most carriers would provide some kind of a credit.
And a lot of the training a lot of carriers now, you're going to have to fill out an application. They're fairly extensive. To be honest, I would not recommend any, unless you are the IT department for your retirement board. But if you use a third party, you're going to want their assistance, or your IT department, if you have one, to complete those applications. But the applications are going to ask those type of questions. So if you don't have multi-factor authentication, chances are they won't even offer you a quote. If you don't have endpoint detection and response, chances are you can't even get a policy. But some of the triggers or the questions they'll ask on the application are, what type of training do the employees do? Do you have a program that you use to give education to the employees? And then that's where the underwriting credits, so to speak, would come from, is that you have a lesser loss profile. So they're going to price you according to that, right? And so I think that's more where you get the credits. But the credits, even if they gave you a 10% credit, most of these premiums are not, you wouldn't be doing, like, you would want to do these trainings regardless of whether you got the credit or not. And the credits are going to be relatively small if they are available for most of these carriers.
And I will echo exactly what Todd just said. Absolutely, you want to mitigate, obviously, you know, your costs, your operating budget, and credits are very much welcome. And they should be provided and rewarded for taking those efforts and protecting yourself. But regardless, again, as I said earlier, if you've never experienced a cyber experience, you don't want to. So I would put all these things into play, regardless of what you are going to be credited on your policy. It was that saying, if an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. It would, to mitigate any exposure to a cyber crime, would be well worth it.
Okay, and speaking of prevention, this one's a little unrelated, or could be unrelated, but someone asked, should we have RFID cards? Are those helpful?
Yeah, those are great so not an alternative, but they're another mechanism to do multi-factor authentication. So as they call it, 2FA, a two-factor authentication. But yes, an RFID card can be helpful as a way to do that second authentication to prove that it's you. Yeah, you know, the only negative there is that if it were to be stolen, then that person has the same key to potentially breach into the system. But yes, a lot of the Maya members do use those. They have little key fobs, and those are great ways to do the multi-factor.
But to expand on what Todd's saying, back to one of the previous points he made, insurance carriers definitely want to see that there are safety loss control precautions in place. MFA, multi-factor authentication, is something that is extremely important and would have a severe impact on whether you could even be quoted or what that quote would look like. When you're dealing in the municipal space, I know there are challenges and hurdles to get around with MFA, especially when you're trying to do the multi-factor authentication off of a code that comes up on your cell phone and the whole use of cell phones. But to Todd's point, in using those cards, fobs, whatever, there's many different ways that you can implement MFA to get around those challenges. So don't let those challenges ever be the preventative cause why you did not institute MFA. That's very important.
And how do you determine the level of insurance you should get?
That's a $64,000 question.
Well, what I would tell you is, you kind of look to what the industry is providing. It has come a long way. Back in the day, the differences between carriers were very extreme. There has kind of been a standardized coverage form that's kind of come about, and I think that's Matt's presentation highlighted that for the most part, most policies you're going to have that. You do want to Jeff's point, you do want to be mindful of the exclusions and maybe the endorsements you can add to pick up some maybe gray areas or shore up some of the gray areas. But as a general rule, most folks, we quote everyone at $1 million. Just right out of the gate, we're going to definitely quote $1 million across the board. There are some sublimits, and sometimes, Matt mentioned that as well. Most cyber extortion or ransomware and cyber crime tends to be capped maybe $250,000, $500,000. But if you're maybe a smaller retirement board, you could consider $500,000 potentially. But for any quote we would ever do, and I'm sure Jeff would be in the same arena, we typically would start at $1 million. But if you're a much larger retirement board, we'd look at your exposures, how much assets you're protecting and the revenue, and we would maybe suggest higher limits. But typically you would just quote options and then see how it comes from a pricing standpoint, and that might dictate, where you land as well.
But that's also a question to Natasha, that I would just say that no matter what line of coverage you're quoting, Every entity is different, their financial thresholds are different. So those kind of limits should be customized to what your needs are. Any good agent will give you probably, as Todd's trying to point out, that we would provide a recommendation for at least the minimum coverage. You shouldn't go below this threshold, but ultimately what limits you would need would really need to be customized and suited to your entity and financial threshold.
And another thing that goes in line with that is deductibles, right? You may say, you know what, we want $1 million policy, but at this deductible, $2,500 deductible, we can't really afford it. But when it gets to 10,000, we can't afford that. It makes it more palatable. So there's multiple ways to play that, those options to come up with a customized solution.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a couple more questions and then we can.
The questions
Move
are
on.
great.
Yeah.
The questions are great. Please,
So
this meeting's for you guys. So please send as many questions as you have, and we'll try to get through them.
yes, so does the municipality insurance cover any of this if we use their IT department? And then the second question I have is related. Do we need a separate policy from the town if they have their own cyber insurance policy? So it's kind of the same question.
Great. It's a great question.
Yeah, that's a common question that we're seeing too. So
Yeah, and then also I just wanted to jump in for Jeff and Dave and Matt, if you're still on, you can feel free to jump in to answer any of these as well. Sorry, go ahead.
okay, so regarding if the municipal coverage blankets over to, I guess, the retirement board, that's a common question that's being asked. So it's understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, retirement boards are a complete and separate entity from the actual municipality. So if you have a town that you're not a county or a district retirement board, but you're the retirement board just for a specific town, and even though you are in that town hall, and you may be using their network, we would have to look at that, but you would need your own separate policy.
Yeah, I agree with what Tom's saying. Unless you have it in writing, verbal is great, but it doesn't hold much water. Unless you have a certificate of insurance, a policy naming you as an additional named insured, unless you have one of those in hand, I can't say for sure you'd be covered by the municipality's policy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do, within Maya, which, Tom and I are, Cabot is a third-party administrator for the Maya program. So under that, we insure about 380 municipal-based entities, including, for a lot of them, the cyber insurance. To Jeff's point, that you are a separate legal entity. And so the policy, unless it was endorsed to add the retirement board, which we will not do, so we will not add retirement boards as additional insured to the cyber policies. There may be a few gray areas where, because you're on their system, their policy may respond to help out a little bit here and there, but I would not want to rely on that if you had a David or breach. And certainly we would not respond, or the Maya program would not respond to any lawsuits that only named or were just named in the retirement board. So it is our strong recommendation that every retirement board has their own separate cyber policy. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions, Tasha?
That's it for now, but I'll keep jumping in if any more come in.
Yeah, all right. So this brings us, so we're going to continue through our slides. I don't know, Todd, we can talk about this again. Dave did such a great job outlining and walking you through these coverages. I don't know if we need to spend any more time on anything in particular. As Todd said, there are nuances to every carrier's policy, but generally there are similar coverages that are provided from, we talked earlier through Dave's presentation, multimedia liability, the security privacy liability, PCI, and they're all the same. Limits would be different. There are nuances how maybe crime and ransomware is approached. I know our policy has one particular set of conditions when it comes to ransom coverage, but again, all very important coverages that I guess the biggest takeaway in discussing coverage is that you would not want to go through a cyber loss alone without a carrier stepping in. When you do experience a cyber event, there is a deluge of folks that swoop in and automatically start getting involved in responding and counseling and providing you all the resources you need in order to stop the event and obviously move forward and to recover from that event. Even IT directors, have experience with IT, but to actually respond to a cyber claim is a different whole set of playing rules and games that you just would not want to do. So I would imagine, I don't want to make any assumptions because we know what that does, but I would imagine all the participants today do have a cyber policy. So I guess we should try to outline just some takeaways for today. If you needed a to-do list on what you need to go back to your offices and figure out what next steps would be the 3 areas that we talked about. So certainly cyber coverage. I know we just talked about if you are on the same network as a municipality, do you have that coverage? We are telling you collectively, basically you would need your own policy, but I would definitely go back to your municipality that you're working with, get the policy, have a review done to make sure that if there is coverage, it is in writing. I wouldn't, and that it's been interpreted by whoever the insurance professional is. I wouldn't just make those interpretations yourself. So definitely make sure you've got a cyber policy, locked and loaded that is enforced. Check with your IT director. A lot of the stuff they already handle without you even knowing, because I've learned more about IT than I ever thought I would know, just dealing with this line of coverage. But when it comes to endpoint detection and response, and you all may not even be familiar with what that is, your IT directors have probably already have that in play because they're doing what they are paid to do to protect your network, and that's already in place. EDR is something that is a requirement for our coverage. So you should have routine meetings. That's the other thing I will add, as we talk to a lot of our members. IT should be an island unto itself. Your IT folks should be a regular conversation and meeting with you so that you are always aware of what's happening with your systems and your network. But definitely make sure you've got all the checks and balances in place, such as EDR. MFA, I know that was a lift, especially in the municipal space. Some municipalities did a better job and a quicker job of getting that implemented than others. You know where you are on that spectrum. If you don't have MFA fully implemented, every employee, then that's certainly another check on your to-do list. I would make sure that is underway if it's not fully implemented. And then lastly, the training. Cannot express enough how important it is to have regularly scheduled training on a monthly basis. There's a plethora of topics that, again, I'm just using Noble 4 because I have experience with them. They handle all areas and aspects of cyber training and different exposures to the cyber event. So definitely make sure that is happening. Folks are checking it. I will tell you this: we have training here. If you don't do your training, you lose access to the system, but you're still expected to do your job, right? So that's how important this is, that we take this serious, that that everyone is trained and to know how to be at the ready and respond when there is some kind of a phishing scheme or whatever it might be that's being presented to an employee. So that's very key. So those are my 2 things.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add 2 things. One is just, the one thing I don't know if we touched on it, was just the impact of artificial intelligence. So just to have that on your on the horizon, I think that's going to only increase ways for people to kind of find new ways to have breaches and find new ways to slip in. And the other thing, do you mind going to the first page, or actually you can go to the last page of the presentation, might be better. And it's a big QR code. There you go. All right, so this is a link to, it actually has our slide deck up, so that it's a link to our slide. But it also has sample incident, and it's actually a slide we did for a Maya based group, so it might have some Maya things in there, but it's similar, very similar to what we did here today. But it also includes a glossary of kind of important terms around cyber insurance, and then it also has an incident response checklist and a sample incident response plan. And so, and you don't have to use those ones, those are just examples. You could Google, cyber incident response plan or cyber incident response checklist, and you'll find similar ones. But that's also a really nice piece to have, because once it happens, you don't want to be figuring out what your next moves are in the middle of an event. So I do think, you don't have to have that thing all filled out and perfectly done, but if you just get a head start or you fill in the main pieces, that way if something happens, okay, this happened, this is my next move. And then this is the timeline of events that I can expect and the people and the resources I need to bring in to respond to this effectively. Because you do want to be, timely with these. This isn't like, our car got damaged and, they can come next week to look at it. Nothing's going to change. You got to be fast moving when these events occur to limit any future future damages as well. So the sooner you can shut it down and stop the infiltration, you might be limiting greatly the actual claim you have. So please make use of those resources with your IT team too. Are there any other questions that maybe came up, or?
There was one that came in earlier. Let me go back through the chat. So you did touch on the coverages or the different types. Are there ones that are most important for retirement boards?
There's probably a long list on the policy. I mean, I'm sure everybody would agree. The ransomware is obviously a large component. The funds transfer, regulatory. I mean, Massachusetts requires that you pay for 18 months of credit monitoring for every party's information that was exposed. I mean, that could run $10 to $40 a month for each one of those parties. That's a staggering figure. The privacy liability, AT&T just settled a class action suit for their breach. That was a $177 million settlement. I'm sure Tom and Dave could add more to this, and Todd.
Yeah, when this coverage first started coming out, you used to be able to, and you still can buy it a la carte. So, right, we went through all, Matt showed all the different coverage forms that are available, and theoretically you could get them a la carte, but it typically just doesn't make sense. The amount of money you're saving to pull out, maybe brand protection. You save $50 on $2,000 or $3,000 of premium. I don't think it's worth it. I think nowadays it's become a relatively standardized offering from carriers. Again, there are some differences. You do want to pay attention to those, but for all intents and purposes, you're going to want to take the offering that the carrier presents, probably all of it, not just pieces of it.
Yeah.
So I don't think it would make sense to cherry pick your coverages. I would go with what they offer, and then either you have a $500,000, $1 million, or $2 million, or whatever you might need.
But on that note, I would recommend that we don't know exactly what coverage you all have, but depending on how your other coverages line up, some carriers will provide some cyber coverage under your package policy and whatnot. We really would recommend that you have a full comprehensive cyber policy. To Jeff's point, a lot of the coverages that he outlined, they are usually baked in, as I know on our demonstration, like we lettered them A through J. A lot of those standard coverages will come in. Your limits, you probably have some flexibility on what you would choose for limits, but I wouldn't just rely on a throw-in that's on a package. I would make sure you have a comprehensive cyber policy.
That's a great point. We've talked to so many folks before where they like, oh, we have cyber, and then they send us a copy of it, and it's just an endorsement on their general liability policy for $5,000 or $50,000 of data breach. that's not worth
Yes,
anything.
yeah.
That's just enough to let you know how in trouble you're gonna be.
That's not to get you in
Agreed.
trouble.
That
Right.
that 50,000 endorsement's not going to get you much.
Right. Right. Right.
So understanding there are many variables, what's the ballpark range for premium costs?
Yikes.
That's
Yeah,
a dollar question.
That's a tough question. It's gonna, some of the determining factors, are going to be the size of the board, obviously funds under management, number of employees. I mean, you could look at a policy on the low end from, $3,000 to $4,000 to, onward and upward, depending on the size of the board.
Yeah, and then obviously what controls are in place, what limits you're buying. So there's
Right.
just it's a tough question, Bill. I think there's too many variables to kind of give you an answer responsibly.
Right, but I will tell you, to expand on that and not to sound like a broken record, there should be budgetary line items for this. I mean, I'm sure the insurance piece would be rolled out under your insurance budget. But there are costs to being, very diligent and protective with cyber. So all the things that we had named, MFA, EDI, those don't come for free. There are all costs associated with putting those preventive things in place, including insurance. So, if you have, your IT person would be a good person to start with. I don't know how detailed any of you get involved with budgeting for IT and cyber, but if not, that may be a new exercise for you. And this should be all part of it. Always try to mitigate, bottom line dollar, but there's just certain things. I'm not saying you should just throw any money at a cyber policy, but you almost get what you pay for. I don't know, Jeff, you and Dave may want to kind of chime in and agree.
Yeah.
No, you're hit the nail on the head, right? I mean, you can get a cheap policy, and then when you have a loss, you have no coverage, right? So
Right.
it's you get what you pay for, and I think you had a great point. You're investing in the policy, right? So if you have the procedures and policies in place, so you're spending money from an IT perspective, it will correlate to, a reduction or a better premium, for subsequent years. So it's kind of a total cost, right? You have your IT cost, then you have your policy cost, but it's a really like a co-investment. So you make that investment in your IT, it's going to help you on the premium side.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I thought, Tom, you guys had a great point about training and I think one thing people are afraid of is asking, if they get an email from somebody, they don't want to seem stupid and call them. I would say, don't be afraid. I mean, my wife works with me. If she sends me an email asking for money, I don't trust it. I would go into the office, I'll verify it. I'll do all the things I would do with anyone. So I would say, don't be afraid to make that extra call just to make sure that it's not fraudulent.
Yeah.
There's just,
Right.
they're getting so sophisticated and it looks so normal that, make that extra call. Just don't take anything like, at par, right? Assume everything's a scam until it's not.
Well,
And don't use the phone number in the email.
Yeah.
You can call from another source that you have.
Yeah. I know it sounds funny and it sounds basic, but I think, a lot of people, because we're rushing, we're so busy in our lives, right? We're so stressed out that we act and we don't take our time to really, vet these things out.
Yeah.
Right.
And you made a good point earlier too with the AI component. I mean, that's where this is going to even get further scary as far as their ability to reproduce voices and on calls even. And there has been a couple incidents with boards this summer, where people are poking and prodding and trying anything from a big to a small incident. So and I think that's occurring in every business. Every business is probably being poked and prodded for vulnerabilities, but it's happening across all spectrums.
And
Yeah,
one other thing. Oh, sorry, Tom, go ahead.
Right, no, just to expand on that, I know, what you're saying in different industries. I don't know if you saw recently, Hollywood is up in arms right now. If you folks saw any of this, that they're up in arms because they're talking about AI, using AI rather than actually actors in certain movies for cameos and whatnot. That's how sophisticated this simulation has become, where they can just take a small sample of your voice, a piece of your voicemail. That's why I said earlier in our presentation that, it's not just you got hacked to an email. They will you know, when you get texts, these weird texts that come in that just, hey, this is Joe, how you doing? You're like, where did this come from? They're prompting you for a response for a reason. They're trying to get to know you. The same thing, you may get, you know, be left a voicemail or asked to leave a voicemail back. They want your voice so they can take a clip of that voice and actually duplicate it and create this whole scheme. So AI, we are just scratching the surface of where that is actually going to go. So again, I will sound like a broken record, especially the point that Bill just brought up about, you know, make that phone call. That's why trainings are so important. The ongoing training will walk you through this regularly, and they will keep you apprised of every kind of step that this is evolving, because we have not seen, there's no endpoint where this is going to go. It's unfortunately, you wish these bad actors took all that energy and put it into good things, but they've decided to go in this direction. So we just need to be vigilant.
No, they're making money and they're going to keep on doing it until maybe something occurs that's going to determine, but I don't know when that's going to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah, and to your point, when we met earlier, I think it was Tom who brought up the point that these are not just some random folks sitting in someone's basement. These are sophisticated individuals with advanced degrees who know how to mimic the system.
Yeah, and they're generally foreign parties, and that's, you know, going back to something Tom said and Matt said. I think, you know, having that incident response team that's going to step in and really do the heavy lifting for you. I mean, obviously, if there's a breach, there's going to be a process, but to have that incident response team that's going to deal with these other parties, that have the legal expertise that's going to come in, you know, the IT teams that are going to help with everything, it's key.
Yeah, and I think to echo both of those statements, when something may happen that, you know, could be an issue, right? I think make sure that everyone who works at your organizations tell you about it, right? So if they click on a link and they, you know, they're not sure if it's a scam or not, just report it. You know, let the teams that know what they're doing look into it, so that way if there is something that happened, they can get ahead of it and you know, make it a distraction, not a disaster. Right. So if somebody hits something, have them not be afraid of repercussions, go report it and tackle that issue right away.
I did get one question that just came in. 4K seems low for a quote. Do you currently insure Massachusetts retirement systems? And can you give anonymously an example of a board size in asset value and the cost of their policy?
We do insure a number of retirement systems now, and we do have some boards at that price point.
The ones we insure through the Maya program, Maya covers the cost for all members currently, so there is no premium. We basically purchased one large policy for all members, and so there's no individual cost just yet. But we could look into that and maybe get back to you with a few of the ones that are outside of that program.
Yeah. If you go into the standard market though, 4,000 is probably on the very low side, I would say. Would you agree, Jeff?
Yes.
Yeah, then it goes to your limit, right? That would probably be, we tend to try to start with a $2 million limit, just because the difference in premium between 1 and 2 million is pretty nominal. So it just feels like that's you know, to offer 1 million, it just seems too low. So we'll start with 2 and then kind of go up from there, depending on the size.
Okay, this next question, my impression is that municipalities do not have cyber insurance. Is that your understanding?
Well, if you're in the Maya program for all lines of coverage, we have it for every single member. And actually, that's a great point. So our cyber program started in 2018 in Maya. And the reason why we started it was because we could not convince members to buy a policy on their own. And we kept seeing claims happening throughout the country, and we were saying, we're going to get hit, and it's going to make us look bad because we can't convince them to buy it. So we just went out and bought it for every single member. We partnered with an insurance carrier for that. One of the leading insurance. There's a lot of leading insurance carriers, but we partnered with one that we found to be a good fit, and so we forced it on every member. And now that we've had it, it's not going away. So every Maya member at least has cyber
Well,
insurance. That's over 380.
And let me just interject, that's a very interesting question, but to what Todd is saying, there's nobody on this green planet that has a computer that is immune to a cyber attack. Remember I told you earlier on, they really say now, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. So, again, cyber, it's not a tangible thing like a fire or frozen pipes where you know how to put certain basic things in place to prevent them. Cyber is still, for a lot of folks, in its infancy stage. It's been around for a long time. You know, folks like Jeff and Dave, myself and Todd, we've been dealing for a lot longer than maybe you folks are, but it's really starting to come to the forefront now because it's at a magnitude that it is. But no one, absolutely no one is immune to cyber exposure. Towns, honestly, municipalities are extremely vulnerable. They're one of the most vulnerable parties that these cyber bad actors like to go after. So again, to Todd's point, it was a lift to try to get municipalities to understand the cyber risk and the needs for cyber coverage and even the training. The coverage was one thing, getting folks to buy into the training was another whole layer. But yeah, no, everybody needs cyber policy unless you're still doing things by mail. And even then, I shouldn't say that. Everybody needs cyber coverage.
And I think part of the when the coverage first came out, it was very expensive, right? And so people didn't want to buy it. And then when more and more carriers got into the market, right, just supply and demand, pricing has come down. So now I think people who haven't maybe looked at it in 2, 3, 4 years, they'll be surprised the premium today versus 2020 or 2021.
Yeah,
So I think that's been a hindrance for people because they think it's a cost prohibitive coverage, and now they'll find that it's not the case.
yeah.
Right.
No, there's a lot more carriers in the space, so obviously with that, costs have become more palatable, so to speak. I mean, depending on the size of the board, obviously, whatever the number, the premium is, obviously, can vary depending on who you are. But and as Tom said, and there's boards out there doing all the right things, but at the end of the day, you still have a vulnerability, and having a policy in place in case something does happen. Not enough good things can be said about what's gonna happen. The incident response team, the coverage, the premiums, they're going to cover such a large chunk of a possible loss for you that the price point for the premium is going to seem small.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you have a loss, you're going to realize you made a great investment in buying that policy.
Oh yeah.
You would have paid triple what the charge would be if you had a loss with no problem.
Just a quick funny story on cyber. I had a client who they had their in-house operations person who was adamant they didn't need the coverage. Fought me. Basically said I was just trying to make money. It was a $4,000 policy, right? So we're not making a lot of money on these. Within the first year, we paid $485,000 in claims, right? So this is just an example. And this is somebody who never had a policy, who did not think he would need one. So it's just, again, now he's as loyal as they come, right? So it's just one of these situations where you have to trust the reason that they have the coverage is because there's going to be a loss.
Yeah, cyber falls into that category. It's either go big or go home, right?
Yes.
There's no little
Yes.
cyber claim. So,
I saw a question come up while we were talking, and it said, why are municipalities or municipal-based entities more vulnerable than maybe the commercial marketplace? And part of that is lack of resources, and maybe not the same type of resources that for-profit or areas and commercial industries can attract. But even then, I mean, when Dave hears that, we've all heard that from potential clients or folks we're talking with, and it's like, Target just got hit. You're telling me your IT is better than Target? Sony just got hacked. You're saying that now. I know the same actors that are going after Sony probably aren't going after you, but you are prime targets because they know your vulnerabilities, and you're maybe more vulnerable than the standard market would be.
And in municipalities, I mean, you have to step back and look at the whole just the entity itself, right? So you're dealing with, usually within a municipality, you're dealing with a school system, public records in town hall, police, where there's a lot of, where there's all this private information. There's a lot of, as we say, low-hanging fruit when it comes to municipalities, which would attract these bad actors. So they're not, well, to Todd's point, sometimes, budgetary restraints and resources are limited on a town, on a municipality level rather than in, a private sector. But it's not even just so much that, it's just there's a lot of information that makes you attractive to these bad actors.
I think there was an event in Texas a few years back where something like 19 or maybe even more municipalities all got hit within the same 1 to maybe 3 day period. And they all had, because they were all using probably very similar systems. So once they got in one, they just boom, 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 right down the line.
Yeah.
Well, that looks like it was the last of our questions. Any final points, gentlemen?
Just buy a cyber policy. I think it's, it's one of these things where, again, it's not a, as Tom said multiple times, it's not a matter of when, it's a matter of, not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I think that's, the way to looking at it. You have to protect yourself in the event of a loss, and rely, when you do have a policy, rely on the carrier to provide the resources that you're paying for. You have a partner. It's not, you're not on an island trying to figure the claim out, rely on the partner.
Yeah.
Yeah, Natasha, I just want to say thank you. You know what? I guess I'm kind of an insurance geek. I know this isn't the most sexy topic. So I think I can speak for all of us collectively as the insurance professionals. If everybody walked away with maybe one thing from this webinar, we've done some good. Because this is a really difficult subject matter to get people to get their head and arms wrapped around. So we thank you for that opportunity. Let us do that.
I want to thank all of you. Oh, Jeff, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the same. And as we heard earlier, the coverage and the pricing has gotten better than where we were years ago. And so it's a better product. And I think, speaking for Tom, Todd, and Dave, it's a product that I think we feel very good about presenting to people now. And so, and thank you for all for being here and listening.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
All right, great. Well, again, yes, thank you everyone for attending and listening to all of this great information. I am going to, this webinar, as I mentioned before, was recorded, so it will be available to rewatch on our website. Anyone who wasn't able to attend can still get credit for it. There will be a survey that will pop up on your screen when I close the webinar. Please submit your feedback. We always read your feedback and listen to you. We're always trying to improve these webinars and provide you with the information that you want. So just let us know what you would like to hear next from us. Ken, I don't know if you wanted any last words.
My last words are just to thank our speakers. We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thanks for
Yes.
having us.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.